All right then. So I was following your Instagram, right? And you made a post about Nick. We have a mutual friend, Nick Barker, of course, you know.
Yeah, yes.
And I thought to myself, I was reading that. Of course, I did a band with Nick, Twilight of the Gods, and that, and he's, close friend and that. And there was something you said is that you were standing in his house or something. And then
No,
who?
he was he was in mine. He was a good friend of my brother's. So and I just kind of discovered the band at that point. And yeah, I just remember coming downstairs one time. I must have been about, I don't know, 12, probably 13. And then yeah, Nick's standing there, and I think I went to his house once or twice as well, around the same age, just like running errands
Yeah,
for,
yeah.
for my brother or whatever. So yeah, it was kind of straight. I was in that world a little bit without really being in that world, if you know what I mean. Like the people were around, but it wasn't
Yeah.
anything to do with me.
Yeah, so sort of peripheral to that, and then somehow there you are standing playing in Mayhem, as you said in the post, what, 30 years later or something. And
Yeah, yeah.
Nick, you know?
It's a very interesting trajectory and a very unpredictable one. So it was definitely the one that I was kind of. I suppose at some point I was aware that that was the where what I was aiming for,
Yeah,
but everyone, or not everyone, but so many people have that dream,
yeah.
and it's I suppose there's just a degree of good fortune, to end up in that place. Of course, there's a lot of hard work and such as well, but
Sure.
you can't deny the fact that then there's also a lot of right place, right time involved.
Well,
Just like with anything in life.
I think it's what I mean. I suppose it's what they call a sliding doors moment or something, isn't it? You know,
Absolutely.
Nick
Yeah, and there
Barker,
was a couple of those.
Nick Barker being your sliding doors moment is an interesting idea. You know?
Yeah, well, I suppose in a way it was because, yeah, I suppose there was probably subconsciously having those guys around made the whole thing a bit more real and maybe a bit more attainable
Mm,
subconsciously. I think some people chase this dream and they don't succeed at it, not because they're not capable, but because somewhere deep down they don't believe it's a real thing that can be achieved.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I suppose having those guys around, it kind of gave me the vision that it is something that can be done by just a guy. It's not some magical thing that only special people get to do.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I've often been with like say for example, even the band I did with Nick, the Twilight of the Gods thing, that started off as a bet in a bar. A friend of mine said, I bet, it's 20 years since Hammerheart, Twilight of the Gods, these Bathory records. Why didn't you put it? Why doesn't Primordial play one of the records? And I said, well, knowing what lazy bastards they are, it's impossible. So he made me a bet. It was like €100 or whatever. And he goes, I bet you can't put a band together to do it. I was like, okay, I'll take the fucking bet. Just texted Nick, texted Runa, a bunch of other people.
Mhm.
And within a year, had a band playing those records, I mean, and then we made
Well,
an,
that's it.
you know,
That's the exact thing that I think makes the difference between people who succeed at this stuff and people who don't. Is it's just a case of just doing it, just getting
Mm.
on with it and doing it. There's really not that much. There aren't that many obstacles in the way that aren't inside your own head.
Yeah,
I think if you just get up and put it together, do the rehearsals, do the legwork, do every there's like a set of stages you have to go through to
yeah.
make something work. And I don't know. It seems very unattainable to most people. And I think some people don't have those mental barriers and just like, well, this is what I'm going to do, so I'm going to go
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember being at Maryland Death Fest a few years ago with what actually Mick, who was in Primordial at the time, who left just before the last album, and we're talking to Steve Von Till, Neurosis, and everybody's a big Neurosis fan, and
Mm.
Mick was like, "Oh, I'd love to, make be cool to do some music with him." And in my head, I would just be like, "Oh, just ask him." Okay, you need a bit of Dutch courage to go, "Hey, man, would you like to do a song or something?" Or
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
In my head, I'm like, okay, I need maybe a few drinks in me to have that. But if he's cool, like, why not? Why wouldn't
Yeah.
you kind of think, well, what's impossible about making a song together? And the actuality is, very often people are, I think, open to the ideas of suggestion if it's something creative with somebody else.
Absolutely. And I think especially in this world, it's super exciting to when a new thing is presented is always exciting. I say yes to basically everything, because it's exciting to me. It's
Yeah,
always exciting to try something new, and especially when it's new with new people that you've kind of their work, but you've never worked with them. That to
sure.
me is one of the great privileges of being in this industry, is to be able to work with people you admire.
So then if we go back then a bit after, let's say, the sliding doors Barker moment, let's call it that. Then you have your I was doing a little bit of Wikipediaing and you
Oh
went to
yeah.
guitar college and stuff, and then you have Imperial Triumphant and then Cradle, right?
Yeah, Imperial Vengeance. I would love to be in an Imperial Triumphant. We
Imperial
just came off.
Triumphant.
Yeah,
Yeah,
those
yeah.
guys are great. We just came off
Imperial
tour with them.
Vengeance. Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic band. Yeah, so it was a bit, yeah, it was a bit more messy than that actually. So I went to study music. I knew I wanted to do something music related. I was always fascinated by not just guitar playing, although that's what I based my degree around, but it was also about composition, and I always wanted to be a composer. And so I worked on that, and then of course, I had my sort of local bands and all the stuff that
Yeah,
you do,
yeah,
when you
yeah.
and then I started to lose a little bit of hope, because I was starting to think, if I'm not on, it's not that I wanted to be at the end, at the finish line, but I felt like I wasn't even on the track yet, and I started to lose a little bit of faith, and I had it in the back of my mind. Okay, so if I get to 25
Hmm.
and I'm not even vaguely in the right way yet, then I'll go to plan B, which was to study psychology. And then around, I guess I must have been about 23, and that was when I got the phone call about the Cradle job, because I'd got to know Adrian and his wife quite a bit. We'd had some sort of social interactions for a while, and somehow it just came up that their bass player had dropped out of the tour, and they
Yeah,
needed someone immediately and urgently. And
right.
I
Yeah.
just happened to be at that they called me, and I was available. And that was very much a sliding doors thing, because I was extremely close to saying no to it, because it just seemed like such an enormously daunting thing,
Hmm.
to go from where I was to way down the line without any of the steps that you would normally go
Sure.
through.
Of
And
course.
so,
Yeah.
of course, the self-doubt and everything was very strong at that point. But luckily, I agreed to it. So that was the first. Then that was the step, and then the guitarist left, and then I took over on guitar, which is of course what I was really trained to do.
Yeah.
And then that went, and then I started the Imperial Vengeance stuff, and then that
Yeah.
all kind of ran parallel for a while, up until I left Cradle, which would have been 2009 or 10. I don't remember exactly.
So basically, you went then from like local banding to bass for Cradle. That was
Right.
Pybus. That was Pybus, right? I used to
Yeah, yeah,
knew him a
exactly. And
little
he
bit
came back
actually.
then, which was great. I mean, he's a
Yeah.
fantastic guy. I love that guy. And yeah, he came back, which was good, because I wasn't, I'm not a bass player, and bass playing is one of those things that I think all guitarists think that they can play bass, but in reality, it's a completely different skill set. I'm not saying that guitarists can't learn to play bass, but you
Yeah.
definitely can't just play bass because you play guitar. So it was good that he came back, and I switched to what I was actually much more competent and confident with.
Yeah, I mean, Cradle and Danny had a lot to do with actually the signing of Primordial originally to Cacophonous Records for the first album. We made our demo in '93, and he was the one who gave it to Neil from Cacophonous.
Right.
So there's quite a lot. Like, it's interesting how the specter of Cradle as that second wave band sort of looms so large over UK black metal. I did an interview for some UK black metal thing a few months ago, and they sort of monopolized as much as as we ended up talking about Venom, and we ended up talking about Cradle and how that just the spectre looms so large in the early
Well, yeah, I mean,
90s over everything,
partly partly because almost everyone who lives in England has been in that band at some point. So it's
Yeah,
obviously, but yeah, of course, it was just a massively interconnected thing with that band kind of like at the center of the web.
yeah. And so then you ended up doing, I mean, had you even played gigs outside of England or what?
No, 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 absolutely not. No, it was an enormous baptism of fire, and I don't know realistically how well I coped with it at the time. I think, of course, everyone looks back and thinks, and at that age especially, you're a moron. but or at least most people are.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
definitely was.
yeah. I was.
Um, so so it was, it was terrifying, and it would have been nice to have developed it in stages. I was lucky because I wasn't too crazy, so I didn't go off the rails too much, but it would have been extremely easy to do so.
Yeah. Well, that's the
So
thing is that that's what when people often ask me after all the years of doing it, how say mutual friends who've never been in bands or done things like that, and you do realize that the fabric or there's such a small dividing line between, as you say, being a moronic young man who's all of a sudden handed all the keys to the sweet store
yeah,
and
yeah,
like not making, after a couple of years, your teeth are rotted out and you're a fucking hot mess because
yeah,
you have no, it's basically somebody going, hey, you have no responsibility, live on this traveling tube around and just do whatever the fuck you want, more or less. And then I work for an hour every night, work.
yeah, exactly that. And there's a great, I think it comes from Kirk Hammett, actually. Fantastic evaluation of this lifestyle, and it applies all the way up, to later ages as well. And I think I don't remember the exact quote, but I'll paraphrase it a little.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's you know, if you work in an office or something,
Yeah.
and you go out on a Wednesday night and you get completely smashed and end up standing on the bar with your trousers around your ankles or something, you'd
Yeah.
be a disgrace.
Yeah.
You'd be a total disgrace. But if you're in a band and you do this, it's like, oh, look at this legend. Like,
Yeah.
he's such a rock star. So there's no kind of incentive to be a better person or to be a smarter person or to, evolve as a human being
Yeah.
because you're kind of rewarded for the worst behavior.
I think that I mean I definitely agree with that. I think that probably in an age of everyone having a smartphone in their pocket, people have had to behave probably a little bit better than they did in the 70s and the 80s.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
certainly it's true. You're in this sort of bubble where you could pay no attention to the news or anything and not, war could start and you wouldn't notice because you're busy doing shots, arguing about, is Kill 'Em All speed metal or thrash metal at the
Yeah,
bar.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's an alternate reality completely. And the thing is that I think it's most damaging for people who get into this stuff and never have to do a real job at all,
Yeah.
because those are the people who whine the most on tours are people who've never actually have never actually experienced any real hardship
Yeah.
in a day's work. Like you said, you work 1 hour a day and the
Yeah.
rest of the time everything is taken care of for you and
Yeah.
you're still complaining.
Yeah.
Versus working a sort of 12-hour night shift.
Yeah.
It's a very, very, very different thing. You can
Just
always spot those people who are spoiled.
Yeah, it's true enough. I think also, at least from our perspective, the relative popularity that we got, we were already kind of 30 something. Say after album 5 or 6 or 7,
Mm.
when you have your moment and before your blip starts to move off the other side of the radar,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
kind of come down the other side. So which is a whole other different existential crisis. But
yeah.
I wasn't 21 or 19 or 22
No, no,
when somebody
no.
went, here you go, you can fucking, we did some tours and stuff. But if I think back and go, God, what the fuck would it have done to me if I was fucking 20 as opposed to 30? I think I would have.
I think I'd be dead, honestly.
Yeah, it's possible.
Realistically, I think so. Yeah, and you see it. You see these people who
Yeah.
have this, and way above our level. These people who have these insane levels of fame and wealth at extremely young ages. I don't know if there are any examples of that turning out well. It's a lot.
I would say unless they actually go sober, find Jesus or something or whatever,
Yeah,
the chances
yeah, yeah,
are
yeah,
unlikely that you're going to be. I mean, the other thing about it is especially in your 40s, you can still, I think, be in a band, behave much like you did at 30. But there's a moment now, I'm 50 this year, and there's a moment now where you kind of realize, like, okay, like the pulling an all-nighter really has to be like this, has to be a bloody special occasion because it's just not physically worth
yeah.
it anymore.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I'm starting to notice that myself, and I don't even think it's an aging thing. I think it's like the whole hangover thing. Everyone says, "Yeah, hangovers get worse," and so on and so on. For me, I haven't noticed that at all. All I've
Really?
noticed is, yeah, but what I have noticed is that I'm smart enough to know it's just not really worth it, and it's not that much fun. And you know, in old days on tours, I would go every single night. I would go out looking for a bar or looking for some party or something.
Yeah, yeah,
And now I think about it and I think, well, I know that 80, and I have a good gut instinct now for when it's going to be a total waste of time.
yeah.
So now it's like, okay, do I want to just go to bed and feel good tomorrow, or do I want to go out to a bar and have a guy talk about Death Crush in my right ear for 2 hours and then go back to the bed and feel like shit tomorrow, you know?
Yeah, it's the law of diminishing returns, really, isn't it? You know,
Exactly, yeah, precisely.
but but we do know, and there are those people, of course, who just head on into their 50s as if the last 15, 20, 25 years has never happened. And every now and again, I think it's fine. But if you were studying then psychology, it must have been quite interesting for you to observe that kind of stuff on tour. Would have given you, did you think you had any other sort of more, how do we say, sort of anthropological way of observing people's behavior or something on tour?
I think, yeah, I mean, one of the things that you really notice is that there's a very, very apparent human society has very apparent roles, and when one person leaves the party or whatever, you can see the roles shifting around. You know, you've got the kind of in very sort of RPG terms, you've got like the healer, you know, the wizard, the philosopher, and all this stuff. And when the dynamic is shifted by somebody coming or leaving, it's interesting how people will sort of shift roles and stuff. And that's a really, really fascinating thing to observe, how people will act differently. They'll become like a completely different role in society depending on the frame that they're set in, the other people around them and the group that they're with and stuff. That's pretty interesting.
Mm. Yeah, and I think also how if you know yourself, where if you, as you say, let's say you're going to go to that bar, when mayhem walks into the bar, people change. They change their attitudes, they change their body language, they change the things that they would say to you, or even a small modicum of fame can totally capsize a sort of social interaction. That's what I
Oh,
mean.
totally. Yeah, yeah.
That's really odd and kind of strange thing. And also, if it's you who are doing the capsizing, that's a kind of, like I said, I think it could turn very, I'm not going to say dumb, but it can turn some people into just, unbearable rock stars. But it also is kind of a really strange thing to observe as well, you know?
It is. It's a strange thing to be on the other end of as well. Like you're absolutely right. It is interesting when people you just feel the atmosphere shift. And of course, you know, with our level,
Yeah.
it's in very, very niche
Yeah.
areas of society, but it still definitely happens. And it's it's not something I think I'd ever be that comfortable with. I don't
No.
really like it. Never fame or like rock stardom is something that stopped being any sort of goal for me when I was probably before I even started this stuff for,
Yeah.
as a profession, because it just doesn't appeal to me. I don't like the idea of being famous. I don't like the idea of being a celebrity. That this is just not doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah.
When I get a ton of praise from people online, of course it's nice. It's nice people want
Yeah.
to take their time to say something about the show or whatever. And I really appreciate it. But it doesn't do anything for me emotionally. It doesn't. I don't feel good about it. You know,
Sure.
it because I kind of I'm my critic. You know what I mean? Like if I it's like, for example, if we have a bad show and everyone's telling me it was great, well, that I know it
Yeah.
was bad. So
Yeah.
it doesn't, that's not going to it's not going to help. Like I said, I appreciate people taking the time to voice their appreciation for things, and it's never like it's not like it's a negative thing. It's just I don't think fame or the idea of fame would do anything positive for me
Yeah.
ever, you know.
Yeah. I mean, like sometimes what I get is somebody will start off a conversation with sorry, but and if they say sorry, but I know the question is going to be about the famine, the IRA, or something to do with Irish history, or something to do with their name. And as I say, you're in a bar and like Dokken is playing, and they want to ask you about Irish history. And look, I mean that's what primordial lyrics are to people, and so
Mhm.
it's fine with me. And I always say, don't say sorry. You're just a person in a bar talking to another person in a bar. The fact that I've made a song about something like the coffin chips, you want to ask me about it? That's fine. Let's just have a chat
Yeah,
about it. Try not, because you have to kind of disarm where it's going to go, because if you start off a conversation with sorry but, it's like you shouldn't apologize. Same way I
yeah,
think that if you're in a bar and somebody says to you they want to talk about, some angle of guitar playing or something, or even
Yeah.
the, as I was going to get to, and is the inheritance of playing the guitar in Mayhem, is,
Hmm.
that's a pretty heavy burden to bear. Now it's probably less so
Absolutely.
now than it was in the 90s and the 2000s. I guess Runa probably had a pretty hard
I
time.
think, yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah, absolutely. It is a heavy burden, and again, Mayhem fans I suppose all black metal fans really
Yeah,
are a very it's sort of 80% positive,
yeah,
and then you've got this contingent of people who are just only like the old school stuff and whatever. That's fine, and
yeah,
then you've got this weird other contingent that are just negative at everything. They only seem to be happy when they're having a negative opinion about something,
yeah,
or maybe it's that they think they sound more intelligent when they're saying something negative. I don't know. It's strange, but that's something that yeah, of course we're very aware of. Both myself and the other guitarist are very aware of, because it's that you're always going to catch flack,
yeah,
playing in this band, because there's always going to be some kind of comparisons and so on and so forth. So you have to have a bit of a thick skin, but you also have to appreciate the fact that you are inheriting a
yeah,
degree of legacy, and you have to respect it, and you have,
yeah,
and that's a driving factor for trying to do the best job that you can do, is the fact that there is this heavy
yeah.
weight on your shoulders.
And then I suppose that also then returns back to the idea that, I mean, if behaving like, as we talked about, like completely over the top and, like a sort of rockstar would make it probably harder to
Yeah,
deal with that,
I suppose it would. I suppose also the worse behaved you are, some people would consider that to be the most appropriate
Yeah, that's true.
course of action for this band. So again, it's kind of complicated. For myself, I think I just have to follow my own instinct on what's the right and wrong thing to do, and try not to, fit other people's uh, perception or preconception of what a guitarist in Mayhem should be like.
Sure.
There's no point in doing that, because you're never going to please those people anyway.
That's
There's no
true.
point.
That's true. And I mean, I also think that there's some element of that, which is just modern society, which is, I mean, it's obviously it's black metal, so it's, it's centered around an element of nihilism and pessimism and
Mhm.
negativity. I mean,
Mhm.
that's just what it is. That's what part of, that's part of the instruction manual. So you kind of had to
Yeah,
expect
absolutely.
that. And there's always
Mhm.
somebody who will come and find me and go, oh, I only like your demo from '93. That's okay. It's fine. But it's but it is part, I think it is also part of our modern interaction, the sort of smartphone digital interaction, that negativity is just a much easier thing to fold into than saying something
Absolutely.
positive.
Oh, yeah, yeah, and it's also extremely easy to be negative to someone, through a screen, than it is to do to someone's
Of course,
face. It's a
of course.
very, very different thing. But yeah, and it also, I think that there's some strange generational um, incongruence now, that I'm starting to notice, that younger generations, for example, they don't drink that much,
Yeah,
and that really confuses me. I like to drink,
yeah.
a lot, and that really, I'm like, how are you then? What do you do for fun? How are you
Um,
enjoying anything?
I mean, fuck all, because they don't seem to be having sex or doing drugs much.
No, right.
I noticed that in my, relatives and people I know who are much younger. And I mean, an awful lot of it just seems to be gym stuff and then making content and that. But yeah, they certainly, like, I couldn't tell you the last time I was at a gig where there was like fucking people who were drunk at it, just fucking raging and
Right,
just whatever. They just don't,
right.
doesn't happen anymore. Unless it's
Yeah,
guys
I
who are
mean,
like
yeah,
55
in
with a
South
sacred
America
right shirt
maybe.
on.
But yeah, yeah, I agree. It's to me, it's just odd. I mean, I'm not saying that everyone should drink heavily. This isn't like an endorsement of that behavior. I'm
Yeah.
just saying it's odd that you don't want to. I don't understand that. It's such a part of the entire experience for me of going out and having fun. And I'm not saying you need alcohol to have fun, kind of do, but like, yeah, it you know, it baffles me. You see people drinking like water at gigs. What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean it's I mean I think it's even just it's if heavy metal is just like a sort of microcosm, then I see it as in a drinking city, in a drinking culture, in a drinking
Yeah,
country like Ireland. You know, you can walk across the city at 3 a.m. on a Saturday, which used to be like a kind of like an insane battle zone, and now
yeah,
not happening. I mean, it's some of it is financial, although I don't think that's the main thing. I think also just the social parameters are changing. People don't socialize the same way. They're gaming, they're
absolutely.
online, they're all these
Yeah,
kind of things, you know. And it does change gigs because a wild a gig like going to see a thrash or death metal band in 1992 or 1990, um, that just doesn't happen anymore. You know, like you
no, yeah, and it's a little bit sad because it it's great to see people just sort of, and don't get me wrong, people still do this, but it's a lot easier for the audience as a whole with a few drinks in them to just let down a little, let their hair down a bit, relax, and really just go with it and
yeah,
really be into it and not care. And the problem is, as you said before, there are, everyone's got cell phones now, everyone's got cameras, everyone's a lot more aware of not wanting to make a fool of themselves or not
yeah,
wanting to go viral doing something
yeah,
stupid. And the thing is, doing something stupid was part of the fun,
yeah.
of in the old
And
days.
it's also how
And
you
it was
learned to navigate the social contract between people in publics, you know, in a place like a
absolutely,
pub
yeah,
or and you know, and also like our pub here was Brussels in Dublin. We would go there, and it didn't matter on Friday if you were walking by and you're like, "Fuck, I'll go in for one." You always met someone. There was an adventure to
yeah.
be had. There was something going on.
Mhm.
You can go in there now. I went in there on a Friday, you know, a few months ago, and there was not a single person there. The barman was just looking at his phone. I said, "How long has it been like this?" This is about midnight. He goes, "I don't know, about an hour." Like not one person.
Right.
So like
But I mean,
zero
you're right.
people.
You're right, though. There is a financial aspect, of course. I mean, it's
Yeah.
insanely expensive. Back when I first started going to pubs. So, like, let's say for maybe 2 hours of minimum wage pay, I could have a great night out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now it would be maybe probably, especially in London, you might get one drink for like an hour's pay.
Yeah.
Which is just it's ridiculous. It's unsustainable.
Yeah.
Of course, you've got Weatherspoons, which is helping a little bit to keep the, I'm a big fan of Weatherspoons.
Did you know that every
Um,
Weatherspoons has a different carpet design?
I didn't know that. That's
there's
that's
there's an Instagram page which is just Weatherspoon carpets.
well, it's definitely something that I'm planning for my retirement. If Weatherspoons is still there in 20 whatever years, I want to
Right.
do the every single Weatherspoons trek. That's like,
It's this is what dreams are made of. Hang on. So then how long was the period then playing with Cradle? Just to go back to
I
that.
sup- that would have been about 6, yeah, about 6 years.
And so which albums were that then to play on?
That would have been Thornography and the next one, Godspeed. I can't remember what it was called, but the next one.
Devil's Thunder or something, yeah.
That's the one. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because there's something interesting about Cradle that I think um I remember like in the 90s where they went in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s, drew them a lot of, you know, opprobrium from black metal fans. But I noticed in the last 5 to 10 years, there's been a sort of big move back to sort of reappraising Cradle or something and reassessing the band in terms of not only the sort of inheritance of that sort of Victorian literary tradition or something
mm,
like this, but also their place in the sort of canon of English heavy metal, which has been sort of interesting to observe the name returning and people I knew I would have known 20 years ago going, ah, blah, or it's kind of like, oh, I've been listening to Dusk and Embrace again and the new album is cool and whatever, you know. What was
yeah. I sorry, go
no, that was kind of it. It wasn't really a question, it was just
on.
more
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah, I was about to agree with you. I mean, there's definitely a kind of, I mean, unfortunately for me, I was kind of in there for the pocket of probably musically the worst period of the band,
okay.
at least for my tastes, let's
Yeah.
say. I would certainly have preferred to have done so. I mean, I always really liked the first few albums, and I
Yeah,
thought especially like Principle of Evil is even now you listen to it, it's
yeah,
just wild.
yeah,
It's wild. It's
yeah,
like bizarre song structures that don't make sense and at the same time definitely absolutely do make sense. Almost kind of proggish, you know,
yeah,
in times, and the storytelling and everything, and the way that the album just takes you on this journey through is it's fantastic piece of art.
yeah,
And then you know, the next couple of releases as well had a similar kind of vibe, and then it just kind of devolved into this weird, we want to be on MTV kind of thing, and it was it lost its it lost that flair for a long time, you know, and that was the thing that was so interesting with that band is it was just nothing else like it. You know,
yeah.
it was, I think it became a little bit Americanized somehow as the years went on, and the that middle era stuff that I was around was very, very much had lost that sense of adventure and journey, like taking you on a journey on the albums, and it became more about trying to sort of get songs into the, you know, onto playlists and stuff. And
It's interesting, like because when I even in the, like I said, it's sort of the microcosm of the sort of primordial thing, we had our moment of more popularity somewhere around about album 5, 6, 7, 8. And you do notice you're kind of coming, you can be coming down the other side of the hill or whatever, you know. But there is sometimes, and then maybe this returns back to the idea of being just a you know a dumb young man or whatever. Sometimes being understanding that you're in your moment now is quite
Mm,
a difficult thing to understand when you're in it, because invariably at some stage you are gonna your blip is going to move off the radar. Now, whether some bands come back in as legacy bands,
yeah.
or classic bands, or cult
Mhm.
bands, but there is a moment where you have to go, oh, we're on the other side of it. And that for someone like
Yeah.
for Cradle, for example, that must have been because there was a moment where Cradle was just everywhere around about 2000, like you just
Yeah.
everywhere. It was just this huge
Yeah.
band. But
Yeah.
invariably it has to come down the other side of it. But that you were sort of involved in that
Yeah,
moment.
I suppose I came in roughly on the just past the peak, probably, or just coming up to the peak. Um, I definitely noticed that things were starting to decline a little bit by the time that you know, was leaving, but it was still flying pretty high, and you know, and compared to most bands who do stuff that's so on the edge in terms of, you know, the mainstream, they've survived this long, so you have to give them credit for that. The
Yeah,
fact that they're still
certainly.
there, you know, that's a real achievement.
Yeah,
But yeah, I know exactly what you mean about there's always a sense, and I think that that blip thing that you were describing, that sense of where you are in terms of career, it's not a straight up and down.
yeah,
There's definitely moments where, say, for example, some years you think to yourself, is that it? Are we
yeah,
done? And then
yeah,
suddenly you'll do a tour that will just explode again, and then you'll feel really, you know, like, oh wow, we're back, you know,
yeah,
and it sort of goes in these strange waves, and it also depends on what territories you're playing. I mean, we went to China last when was it? It was the beginning of this year, and wait, was it? Yeah, it was, and we announced the show, and it sold out in 2 seconds. So then we added another show, and that sold out. And I wonder, you know, how many more we could have added before it stopped selling out.
yeah,
And going there, it was a real sense again of like, wow, we're huge.
yeah,
You know, it was this kind of totally different territory and a totally different. And of course, we've never been there,
yeah,
and it's a territory that it seems to be very hungry for this kind of art that is just being allowed to be displayed in that country, and it was great. You know, it was a great time, and that was one of those moments where it felt like, wow, this feels like going up again. You know.
yeah. I mean, I suppose that's where many people would have looked at South America 20 years ago,
Mm.
15, 20 years ago. You know, I suppose again that the smartphone thing has changed things a lot. A lot of times now when you go to South America and it will be a sea of mobile phones sometimes compared to what it was 15 or
Oh,
20 years
totally.
ago,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, totally.
But so,
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
but then how did the, well, then how did it end up, you know, sort of from leaving Cradle, and then you know, you must have. Did you play with Mayhem with Cradle, or how did that? Because I know the Mayhem
No, there was
for
no
years. You know,
crossover really. There was a actually right when Runa left,
sure.
I got there was some talks at that point for me to go over and play with them. But the problem was, well, there was a couple of problems. One was that they were a bit edgy about the fact that I was coming from Cradle, and this was right at the point where that band name had become kind of like,
Yeah,
you know, it wasn't a good thing to have attached in terms of the true
yeah, of
kind of
course.
people.
You know, I get it. Yeah,
And yeah. And so there was that. And then there was also the problem was that we had a tour coming up, which was, I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks.
oh,
So it was like, okay, bird in the hand,
yeah,
I have definite work now, or I can risk maybe, but then I lose, you know.
yeah, yeah.
So it was a bad time. It didn't work out. And then I went for a couple more years, and then I left Cradle, and then I was kind of drifting for a little while. I was doing the Imperial Vengeance stuff,
Sure.
drifting a bit, and then one day I got an email from Attila. It was like 1 or 2 days after Christmas. I hadn't heard from him from a while. He was just kind of like, "Hey, what's up?" And I was thinking, okay,
Yeah,
definitely he wants something,
yeah.
because yeah, you get so. And then the next follow up, he just said, "Do you want to come over and rehearse with us?" And that would have been 2011. No, yeah, Christmas 2011.
Right. Yeah.
So that's kind of how that came about. So it was kind of like finally picking up on what started in 2008 with this, and now the time was right.
And so then, did you sit down and have a kind of a think about, are you going to change your style, or is there some things you should kind of move into the playing style or out of it, or you know, because
It was,
because
yeah,
Cradle's a bit more trad metal-y, got some Maiden parts and stuff in it, you know.
absolutely. It's a lot more heavy metal, definitely, and it's a lot the yeah. There was definitely some things to learn, and some adaptations to be made, and that took quite a while, to be honest, probably years really.
Yeah,
And learning the songs was the funny thing with the Mayhem catalog is like you can learn about 80% of it in an afternoon, and the remaining 20% will take you 6 months because it's so complicated and so difficult and so hard to to get.
yeah,
And so that was kind of like the set. It was, I learned most of it pretty much in a day, and then the remaining few bits from the Grand Declaration and Ordo albums took me weeks, or it took me all the way up to the rehearsal. I think I had about 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something.
well, that's
So
that's kind of widely considered by most musicians. Once they dig down into the Runa stuff, they go, fucking hell, what's
yeah,
going on
yeah,
with some of these parts, you know.
yeah, indeed. And so it's cool that we play some of that stuff live as well, because it's challenging and it's interesting, and it's fun to do that stuff. And it's the thing that I think sets this band apart from most other bands. There's not really any other bands that sound like Mayhem. There's a entire genre that sounds like the Mysteriis album, but
Yeah.
the band as a whole, there's really no other bands that sound like Mayhem. It's a weird mix, and actually, when you break it down, it's a really weird mix. It's almost like a bunch of different genres all sort of mashed together into some strange
Well, I think that
muted.
like every era of the band has, because it has different people playing in it who've brought an imprint of their own style. It does alter a bit, you know. I mean, I thought, as you know, after Dimitris, then the first time hearing Wolf Slayer Abyss, I was there like, okay, I get this. This makes sense to
Yeah,
me.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
Grand Declaration didn't, but that's because I think at the time none of us were used to hearing drums that sounded like that. Like we just I've never heard drums that sound like that. I
No,
couldn't get my head around what was happening, even though in 7 or 8 or 9 years' time, lots of things had that same sound, you know?
that's true. Yeah, I mean, the Wolf Slayer thing felt like a really logical evolution from the
Yeah,
Mysteries for me. It was a very very similar vibe, but it was just a little bit more, just fractionally more technical.
yeah,
And you notice that Runa picked up on some of the weird things that the band probably did by accident.
Yeah.
like strange things where you'll have a riff that just for no reason has a couple of extra beats at the end one time, or this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
or a bunch of stuff that's in 5/4, or
Yeah.
it and he sort of took that and just developed it just a little bit more and made it just one step further. Took the but then Grand Declaration was it felt like that was sort of like 10 more albums of evolution down the line. It just went really, really fast into a completely different dimension.
I have a feeling it's something I need to revisit and listen again, because I wouldn't say I've heard it since about a year or two after it came out. I found it so hard to live with. But
I
I
think
think
a lot
that's
of people did. I don't think you're alone in that. We have a few songs that we play from the catalog of that album, which I actually really like, but there are definitely portions of the album that I find extremely difficult to grasp or to get any kind of sort of emotional interaction with as a listener.
and then so then approaching the songwriting and stuff, you definitely sort of brought some other influences to the table then compared to writing with Cradle, or how did you really do
Yeah,
that?
yeah, it's a really weird thing writing with the Mayhem. It's such a non. I don't know how to describe it well. It's like you have to of course you have to bring a degree of your own personality and your own, because otherwise you're not really doing art. But
Yeah.
it's definitely you're definitely not creating what you would create if you had carte blanche.
Interesting. Yeah.
There's so many ideas that we'll present that just never get anywhere, even though they might be great. They might be great riffs or great entire songs, but it's just, if it's not right, if it doesn't
Yeah.
click with the logo, with the then it's not there. So it's a very different process to any other writing experience. And I've composed music for most of my adult life for various things, for like film trailers, for library music, all kinds of stuff, all kinds of different genres. And this is totally different, because even in those circumstances, when you're composing to a brief that's been given to you by like BMG or Sony or whatever,
Yeah.
even then you have a degree of well, this is how I want it to be and this is how it is. But with this writing for Mayhem, there's none of that. It's like, okay, this is how I want it to be. Okay, well then we're not using it.
I think that's
No.
probably the same for most people in the position that you're in the sense that you're sort of boarding the train a couple of stations after where it's begun, and you sort of have
Absolutely.
to get used to well, lots of different things. I'm not going to use any more train metaphors, but you know what I mean. Because
Let's
Mick,
have some wood training.
yeah, because Mick used to say that about when he joined Primordial, and that he's just had to write with Primordial in mind. What he actually wanted
Yeah,
to do was music like Tragedy and Brutal Truth, but
yeah, yeah,
you have to
yeah, yeah.
open chords.
Exactly that.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. And the thing, I mean, of course, when Runa came in, he started off doing that, and then he just went off and did his own thing massively,
yeah.
you know. But if we were to do that now, I mean, we're 40 years into the band at this point. So if we suddenly decided, okay, this is the direction we're going now, I just don't think it could be done. I think it would be
Yeah.
too much at this point. I mean, you say like it's more than a couple of stations in at this point on the train
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
It's a long time down the line. So we really do have to respect that, and we have to respect the framework of what it is and the entity of what it is. And it doesn't mean that we can't do stuff that's a little bit out of left field, or so we can do some weird stuff, but we have to be a little bit careful, or not a little bit. We have to be very careful, because at this point there's not that much room for adding a whole bunch of new stuff to the
It
sound or
feels to me like there's almost less than there was 15 or 20 years ago, perhaps,
yeah, I would say so, absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
because
absolutely.
you're rather than forging out into new areas. I think it's because less and less people are, to be honest, listening to or paying attention to a full work of art or an album anymore compared to 15, 20, 25 years ago.
Totally. I mean, the majority of people, we have new fans every time we
Sure.
come around. You can see there's a new generation, and I think that the fact the Lords of Chaos movie had a lot to do with that.
Oh yes, of
It brought
course, yeah.
people in. So but of course, these people are in. uh, they're coming to the door for the legacy and the novelty of it. It's not
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that they're not staying for the music. I'm not disparaging them at all. I'm saying
Yeah.
that that's the thing that's drawing them in.
I think
And
it's just the nature
yeah,
of where things are right now, in society and
yeah,
stuff as well.
yeah,
Do
yeah,
you
absolutely.
do you feel then like these last couple of years, and especially sort of post lockdown, but especially the last year or two, I've had this sort of feeling, this sort of sense of like, okay, the main body of your career is behind you. That's just age. There's nothing you can do with that.
Mhm.
But how many more years are you going to do the thing that you do? Or this train just goes for another couple of years and then we're going to do something else? Or, because I mean, realistically, can Mayhem be 50 years old? Because,
I don't know. I mean, we're
yeah,
aiming towards it. There's no talk of stopping yet.
yeah, sure.
Of course, I'm very conscious of because this is my main thing right
Yeah,
now. But I'm very conscious of the need. I suppose the need both spiritually and practically. The need to have other things going on.
yeah,
I'm very aware of that, and I'm quite happy to do this forever.
yeah,
In some capacity. I've got like my little synth project that I play with that I could easily turn into something live
yeah,
if I put some time and effort into it. I have a few other projects with other bands, like I have this Veil band, which is kind of we do like a song every now and then. There's lots of stuff hovering around that
yeah.
in fact, the Imperial Vengeance stuff is possibly back on the table, but that's going to be um, a challenge to do. But we have been talking about potentially doing some I don't know, uh, animation of that.
Yeah,
So I'm always conscious of the fact that this band Mayhem can finish at any moment,
yeah.
at any time, because that's the nature of the band. It's mayhem in name and nature. You absolutely can't rely on it. But in terms of could I imagine it going to 50 years? Yeah, absolutely, definitely could.
It's a weird
Whether
thought.
it will, who knows?
It's a weird thought because, fundamentally, I mean, when I remember, like, if I remember hearing albums, when I started secondary school, and in the summer between, which was maybe end of '87, getting Ride the Lightning, or
Mhm.
say getting what would be in '87, Into the Pandemonium or something, and
Mm.
just it Kill 'Em All seemed like a million years before, but it was only '83, or you know what I
Yeah,
mean. So it was only four or
yeah,
5 years, but it felt like an eternity. But now,
yeah.
like we were closer to 1955 or 1960 then than we are now to the
Yeah, I know it's wild, isn't it? I
yeah,
think that this genre, though, I mean, metal in general, has definitely, the years you're describing, it was like the birth of the universe. Everything was happening. Like stuff was 6 months was a long time in that
yeah,
era. Someone was coming
huge.
up with a new way to do something, a new sound,
Yeah,
new guitar technique, some stuff was just changing constantly. So in a weird way, those years, it's like it's like when you go from 12 to 18.
yeah.
There's a lot more happens then than going from 30 to 36 or whatever,
This is definitely true.
Um,
This is definitely true. Yeah.
so now I think that expansion has slowed quite significantly, and not that much happens year by year in the metal scene. It maybe once every 10 years something comes along that makes you go, huh, that's different.
My sense
But
is that
it's
my sense is that there is a whole other scene of bands that I sort of don't know anything more very much about, that younger people are listening to, whether it's Knocked Loose or Slaughter to Prevail or all these kind of bands that, and traditional metal to me, and I did a podcast on it a few months ago. It's in a kind of state of managed decline, like much of
mm,
Western
mm,
civilization or whatever you would want
yes,
to
indeed,
say.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that you just sort of have to make peace with the fact that the things you're influenced by or like, or the sound or everything, it's once you've been around 30, 40 years, and the likelihood of being something that's exciting and attractive to younger people, whatever that means, is probably elusive. But in the case of Mayhem, it can be slightly different because, as you say, of the movie, which is such a
Yeah.
strange sort of ameliorating sort of anomaly somehow in the middle of the or at the end of the career, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is what's so fascinating is that we are still getting that people do, the new generations are getting this kind of sense of danger and excitement from it, which is what you need when you're that age. The only
Yeah,
only way you're going to get pulled into something is if it hits you in a certain way. It feels a little bit anti and a little bit,
yeah,
yeah. So yeah, I guess it's a very unique position in that sense that somehow we're still getting a little of that effect happening. It probably, of course, it's directly threaded all the way back to the stuff that happened that no one wants to talk about in the band anymore, but it's the only thing that
yeah,
everyone outside of the band wants to talk about.
yeah.
So yeah, of course, it's about that, and you can't escape that, and you never would. It's interconnected with what the band is. It's just that's the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the attention to detail in the movie was incredible. I mean, the setting up of the rehearsal rooms and the same guitars and same shirts and everything was incredible. But again,
Yeah.
it sort of looked a bit like an MTV um
Well, yeah,
sort
it
of
was kind of like
video and
Dawson's Creek, the black metal years. It was all very, very
yeah,
weird. But aesthetically, it was stunning. I think that the violence was very, very visceral and really well realized.
yeah,
I think that there was a lot of, I mean, like the character assassination of Varg. I mean, when I say character assassination, I mean the
yeah,
way that you if you really want to make if you wanted to make him look bad, there was ways to do it that didn't involve such ridiculous overt stupidity
yeah,
that had nothing to do with his real character.
yeah,
And so that was a bit of a shame. I think that it was just kind of okay. You can make him the villain, but you need to do it in a way that's a
yeah,
bit more subtle. Otherwise, it becomes almost comedic.
yeah. And I think that that's what I think the director was searching for to make it a kind of like a teen movie gone bad. But as you say, it looked a bit like a sort of MTV teen video or something. But it also which paid zero reverence to the music of the at all.
Mm,
Like it
mm.
never once kind of positioned itself at the point which went, by the way, the music was fucking incredible all around, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
So for people
that
who
was
were, just sort of the uninitiated, they'd be like, look at these fucking idiots. Of course, everybody's 18. You're an idiot when you're 18, but
yeah,
at the same
absolutely.
time,
Yeah, it was. Yeah, but we um we have definitely seen a benefit of that film
yeah,
happening, and I hope that the people who come to the band via that route realize that that actually that isn't really what it is, and appreciate it for what it is, and then we gain a new fan that's a real fan, and
yeah.
that's kind of that's the best outcome from that.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's similar in a sort of a smaller way to say that Motley Crue, the Dirt thing, sort of reappraised them for a generation of people. And it can portray everything in a sort of cartoonish manner, but at the same time, it probably did have a knock-on effect to reinventing elements of the band once again.
Yeah, I suspect so. Ultimately, you have to just appreciate. Of course, this stuff was nothing to do with me in the first place.
Yeah,
This is something that I'm on the outside of. But the just being involved, being involved with the band, I just have to kind of say, well, it's it's doing something positive. Like I said, if it's bringing people to the band and then they're staying for what the band really is rather than what they're seeing through the movie, then that's great. Then we're gaining, real fans, and you can't ask for anything more than that, really.
so you've probably just unpacked the bags from this American tour. Only you must be now going off this. I don't know, in 1 or 2 weekends to some festivals. It's all kind of starts
Actually,
again,
no.
right?
Yeah, no, I've got a little bit of time now. We're working on a new album, so that's
Oh yeah,
going to be some effort and emotional distress. But yeah, that's the next stuff. We have got some festivals coming. Right now, I'm trying to focus on just getting myself back into some sort of like functioning state as a human body. I've
yeah,
got gained so much weight and I've lost so much. I've gained weight in all the places I don't want it, and I've lost weight in all the places that looked good.
yeah.
So now I'm trying to sort of undo the damage a bit, get my sleep back onto schedule, and yeah, just bit of sort of bit of a sort of general MOT, and just just
Yeah.
fix everything up, and then start to look at some options of things to do. We're not that busy this year. We don't have that many shows lined up for the rest of the year. So this is an opportunity for me to think about other things, you know, in the meantime, other stuff that I could be doing, other projects.
Yeah.
I haven't got that far yet, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's time for me to start to lay some potential foundations.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely know exactly what you mean. All right.